There's one image that defines Allen Iverson before any game. It's not a layup, it's not a crossover. It's Iverson arriving at the arena, chains across his chest, oversized clothes, tight braids, walking like the entire world owed him respect. The NBA bought that image, put it on posters, used it to sell sneakers, video games, and television contracts. That image was business, and then one day that same NBA decided to ban it. In October 2005, Commissioner David Stern signed the first mandatory dress code in league history. No hats, no visible chains, no baggy clothes. Business casual for everyone. And even though officially it was a measure about professionalism, everyone around the league knew exactly who they were talking about. But here's what almost nobody tells. The story of this dress code is not a story about clothes, it's a story about power, about control, and about a league that for years sold a culture it was never fully willing to embrace. Iverson was the exact center of that contradiction. To understand what happened in 2005, you first have to understand what David Stern built in the 20 years before that. When Stern became commissioner in 1984, the NBA was a league with serious problems. Low ratings, drug scandals, and an image that inspired no confidence in major sponsors. Stern rebuilt it from the ground up. With Magic Johnson and Larry Bird first and Michael Jordan after them, Stern turned the NBA into a global marketing machine. Corporate sponsors, flawless advertising campaigns, players smiling in sneaker and cereal commercials. Basketball became the coolest sport on the planet, and that was worth billions of dollars. But Stern had learned something very specific from the drug crisis of the 1980s. The reputation of the league was just as important as the game itself. A bad image could destroy in months what took years to build. That stayed with him forever. And when, at the end of the 90s, a new generation of players arrived that had never read Stern's corporate playbook, tension became inevitable. Allen Iverson entered the NBA in 1996 as the #1 overall pick, 6 feet tall in a league of giants, with a crossover that left defenders sitting on the floor, and with a personal story that didn't fit any corporate mold. Childhood poverty in Hampton, Virginia, time in jail at 17, and a survival instinct you could see in every movement he made. And you could see it too in the way he arrived at the arena. Braids, visible tattoos, chains across his chest, oversized clothes, street language with no filter. Iverson wasn't playing a character, he was exactly who he was, and paradoxically, that was what made him magnetic. Fans went crazy for him. His Reebok sneakers sold like water. His jersey became the most popular in the league. In 2000, Iverson released a rap single under the name Jewels. It was called 40 Bars, and the lyrics were controversial enough to spark an institutional firestorm. Stern summoned him to his office in New York. And here comes one of the most cinematic moments in this entire story. The commissioner of the NBA, wearing a suit and all, pulled out a sheet of paper and read Iverson his own lyrics out loud. Iverson later said he tried not to laugh because he knew exactly how serious the situation was. The album never came out, and the relationship between the two was marked forever. Because Stern didn't just say it in private, publicly he declared Iverson's lyrics coarse, offensive, and antisocial, and warned that he had the power to expel him from the league if he engaged in offensive conduct, including inappropriate speech. He was telling his most popular player that even his voice was a problem. And meanwhile, the league kept selling his image to the world. At the beginning of the 2000s, something started to change in the public conversation around the NBA. Not in the game itself, but in the way people talked about it outside the court. ESPN programs, major newspaper columns, late-night talk shows, they all started repeating the same narrative. The league was becoming too street. Players had too many tattoos, too many chains, too much attitude. The word circulating, even if people didn't always say it out loud, was thug. And it carried all the implications that word has in American English when applied to black athletes. Iverson wasn't the only player with that style, but he was the most famous, the most successful, and the loudest, which made him the perfect target for the debate. And that debate stopped being about basketball. It became a cultural argument about identity, race, and what kind of person was allowed to be the face of a multi-billion-dollar league. Second, open loop, this was no longer just about how a player dressed when arriving at the arena. November 19th, 2004. The Indiana Pacers were visiting the Detroit Pistons at the Palace of Auburn Hills, with the Pacers leading 97-82 and less than a minute left on the clock. It was a regular season game and it was basically over. Then Ron Artest committed a hard foul on Ben Wallace. Wallace shoved him. A fight broke out on the court like sometimes happens in the NBA. The referees controlled it. Artists trying to calm down laid across the scorer's table, waiting things out, and then a Pistons fan threw a cup of beer at him from the stands. What happened next changed the league forever. Artist jumped into the crowd. His teammate Steven Jackson followed him. The fight spread from the seats back onto the court, players and fans punching each other while television cameras captured everything. The Associated Press called it the most infamous brawl in NBA history. The consequences were historic. 9 players suspended, a total of 146 games lost, $11 million in salaries gone. 5 players and 5 fans faced criminal charges. The Indiana Pacers, real championship contenders that season, were destroyed as a team. And the NBA was left with a massive image crisis. Sponsors started asking questions. League executives started asking questions. And Stern, after spending 20 years building the brand, saw in those images exactly what he feared most, the perception that the league had lost control. 11 months later, he announced the dress code. October 17th, 2005. Stern sent a memo to every NBA team. Beginning with the start of the season, all players would be required to attend games, official events, and press conferences in business casual attire. Suits, or at least collared shirts, dress pants, dress shoes, and a list of specifically prohibited items, hats of any kind, durigs, sleeveless shirts, sunglasses indoors, oversized clothes, and chains or medallions worn outside clothing. It was the first time in the history of a major American sports league that players' clothing outside the court had been regulated. There's one detail that almost never appears in videos about this topic, and that helps explain the personal dimension of this issue for Stern. 1 year before the Malice, during the official Team USA dinner at the 2004 Olympics, the Serbian national team arrived in matching athletic jackets. The NBA players arrived in sweatpants, oversized jeans, diamond earrings, and platinum chains. That image deeply bothered him. It wasn't just the Detroit fight, it was an accumulation. Reactions inside the league were mixed. Antonio Davis, president of the Players Union, negotiated the terms with the league but told USA Today that he didn't think it was fair for them to dictate exactly how players should dress. Steven Jackson, who had been in the middle of the Detroit brawl, called it a racist statement against young black men. Chauncey Billups said he felt they were being labeled for who they were and what they represented. Tim Duncan, the most dominant power forward of the era, and maybe the player least associated with the league's hip-hop aesthetic, summed it up in the most direct way possible. "I think it's stupid. I understand the hats and the durags and the jerseys, but I don't understand why they're taking it this far." And then there was Iverson's quote, the one that captures everything best. In a later interview, Iverson explained it like this: when he was doing it alone, the NBA didn't care. But then Kobe started showing up wearing diamond chains and baggy clothes, and everyone started copying it, and then the league said, "Stop." In other words, the problem wasn't the culture. The problem was that the culture had expanded beyond what the league could manage. Here's the heart of all this and where the story becomes truly uncomfortable for the NBA. During Iverson's years, the league used him as a global export product. His Reebok sneakers were among the best-selling in basketball. His rating in NBA Live was the one everyone picked. His jerseys sold out everywhere. The aesthetic Iverson represented, that mix of hip-hop culture and street basketball, was exactly what made the NBA cool for an entire generation of fans. That had enormous economic value. But that same style, applied in the arena tunnel, in press conferences, in official events, became too much for certain groups. Sponsors who preferred a different image, executives who wanted something more professional, and a commissioner who had built his career on the idea that the league's reputation was untouchable. So the NBA did something very specific. It separated the Iverson on the court, the one making them money, from the Iverson in real life, the one making them uncomfortable. It monetized one and regulated the other. And that, beyond whether the rule was fair or unfair, beyond whether there was racist intent or not, reveals something very concrete about how power functions inside a league of this scale. You can be the most valuable product in the system, and the system can still decide under what terms it accepts you. Charles Barkley, who always had the ability to say the uncomfortable part out loud, acknowledged on The Tonight Show that the dress code had racial connotations, and he still supported it. "Bosses in every business have the right to impose a dress code," he said. It was a way of admitting the tension without resolving anything. What happened next is the most interesting part of all. The dress code didn't kill the culture. It formalized it. It forced players to find another way to express themselves, and what they found was something the NBA never anticipated: high fashion. Dwyane Wade said years later that the dress code was directly responsible for his interest in fashion because suddenly he had to think about what he wore. LeBron James started appearing on GQ covers. Russell Westbrook turned every arena arrival into an event. And today in 2025, the NBA tunnel has become one of the most followed fashion runways in the world. There are Instagram accounts with millions of followers dedicated exclusively to documenting players' outfits. Brands from around the world pay enormous amounts of money for players to wear their clothes in the tunnel. The league that tried to suppress the aesthetic ultimately turned it into one of its most powerful marketing assets. The culture won. It just had to put on a suit first. And that's the question left hanging when you look at the complete story. The same question we started with, but now carrying all the weight behind it. Did the NBA change its rules because of Allen Iverson? Or was Iverson the one who exposed something the league had always known but never wanted to say out loud, that it was willing to sell a culture as long as it could control it, and that the moment that culture got out of its hands, the response was to write a rule book? The answer, as always in stories like this, depends on who you ask. If you made it all the way through the video, hit the like button hard. It's the best way to help this reach more people. See you in the next one.